Okay, I'm going to begin. And good day to everybody, wherever you are, morning, afternoon, or evening. My name is Andrea Spindle, and I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, which is based in Toronto. And it's my pleasure to moderate today's web talk in honor of Yom HaShoah, and in the continuation of our series of presentations that we're offering under the title Anti-Semitism is a Virus Too. CAEF is a registered charity that promotes interfaith understanding, combats lies about Israel and the onslaught of anti-Zionism that is generally disguised anti-Semitism and sometimes not so disguised. We promote universal adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism and its accompanying principles. But we recognize that we're in somewhat of a time warp where never again has become ever again, where extremists on the left and on the right are again expressing anti-Semitic views, and where Islamism has moved westward and is part of this new extreme Jew hatred. I encourage you to visit our website, caef.ca, and support our organization so that we can continue to bring important speakers to your attention, people with special knowledge that will help in combating anti-Semitism and in our developing campaigns to educate governments at all levels to take the action they need to actually make IHRA more than just a public policy statement, but a blueprint for action. We are committed to ending the annual hate fest that festers at our universities under the guise of Israel Anti-Apartheid Week. It's really a campaign to denigrate Israel and deny its rightful existence. Our speaker today is truly one of a kind, the only professor in India, if not in all of South Asia, who teaches courses in Holocaust studies, global Jewish history, and about Muslim-Jewish relations. Dr. Navras Aafreedi has for over a decade been writing and speaking about Judaizing movements, about the traditions of the Israelite descendants in South Asia, about anti-Semitism, genocide, and Indo-Judaic history. He has also written and published many articles on related subjects, the scope of which I haven't got time to relate to you today, but I urge you to read his biography, which we posted on our website, and become familiar with his work. Following Navras' presentation, I will moderate the Q&A session, so please use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen to write your questions. I'll do my best to read as many as possible, and he will respond. The presentation today will be recorded and posted on our website, and you'll be advised when it's available. So welcome, and over to you, Navras.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I'm most grateful to the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation for giving me the opportunity to speak in honor of Yom HaShoah. And I'm in particular very grateful to my friend, Ms. Andrea Spindle, the Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation. A very warm hello to all the people who have registered for this webinar. Welcome to it. I shall now share my screen with you so that you are able to access my PowerPoint presentation. And I will give you I'll give you a layout of my talk so that you know how we proceed. Oh, Andrea, you would need to enable me to share my screen.
Oh, okay. Let's see. No.
I've done that. You're ready to go.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the title of my talk is Holocaust Denial, Minimization, Inversion, and Trivialization in South Asia. I shall be using the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. 27 European Union countries have agreed to it. And the definition is anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews, rhetoric and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism directed towards Jews, towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and / or their property towards Jewish community, institutions, and religious facilities. I'm just trying to figure out how I could move the boxes, because the boxes at the corner are
Oh, how to make the slides go forward?
hindering my view of my slide. Yes, it's better now, much better. Okay. The manifestations may include the targeting of the State of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity. However, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, for example, gas chambers, or intentionality of the genocide of Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, the Holocaust, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. Anti-Semitic acts are criminal when they are so defined by law. For example, denial of the Holocaust or distribution of anti-Semitic material in some countries. So this is the definition of anti-Semitism that I shall be proceeding with. This is the region that I'll be talking about: India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh primarily. Now, I would be focusing on what, how, and why of each of the following: denial, minimization, inversion, trivialization, de-Judaization, admiration for Hitler, lack of awareness of the Holocaust, and what can be the remedial measures. Denial. What is denial? It is refusal to accept the Holocaust as a historical fact. How it is done? It is done via revisionism or by simply calling the Holocaust a hoax. Why do people indulge in denial of the Holocaust? They do so to abolish the martyr status claimed by the Jews and bestow it on another group, to cancel the notion of Holocaust's uniqueness, to cancel, or at least abate, the allegedly greedy Jewish claim for the return of property looted by Nazi Germany during the World War II, to discredit acts of commemoration, to undermine Israel's legitimacy in the West and help in its eradication. Because Holocaust deniers apparently believe, according to Mayor Litvak, that the memory of the Holocaust was the foundation of Western support for the establishment of the State of Israel. Therefore, refuting it would severely undermine Israel's legitimacy in the West and help in its eradication. The fact is that it was not the Holocaust, but the Yishuv that founded the State of Israel. Had there not been a thriving self-governing community of 600,000 strong Yishuv, the Zionist Jewish entity residing in pre-state Israel, built over years since the first settlement in 1860, the 360,000 survivors would not have found a shelter. And the United Nations, November 1947, partition resolution voting for the establishment of a Jewish state, as the eminent Holocaust scholar Dina Porad points out, came indeed after the Holocaust, but not as its direct result. Political considerations such as the Soviet interest in replacing Britain in the Middle East and preventing American future influence in the area were much more instrumental than belated empathy. There have been a number of manifestations of Holocaust denial in South Asia from time to time. One such manifestation of it was when I organized a Holocaust film retrospective in 2009 in my hometown, Lucknow, which happens to be a major center of Muslim scholarship. During the Holocaust film retrospective, 46 films were screened in a span of 14 days. While the event was in progress, the two leading Urdu daily newspapers there published front page stories denying the Holocaust with the aim of sabotaging the event. Those newspapers were Rashtriya Sahara and AG. The arguments that they made were largely based on the ones made by well-known Holocaust deniers such as Arthur Woods, David Irving, Harry Elmer Vance, David Hogan, Paul Razinier, and Arthur Woods. This is the cover of the brochure that we published when we organized that Holocaust film retrospective. These are those stories that were carried by these leading newspapers. And this is the story from the Urdu daily newspaper Aag, which in Urdu reads Sadi ka sabse bada jhoot, Holocaust, the biggest hoax of the 20th century, the Holocaust. I'm sorry, I just realized that there is a typographical error in the Urdu title. The N should be B, actually, the letter B. This is the other story that appeared in the Urdu daily newspaper Roznama Rashtriya Sahara. More or less the title was the same. It was Holocaust, 20वीं सदी का सबसे बड़ा झूठा अफसाना. Holocaust, the biggest hoax of the 20th century. Now, here is a popular Urdu poet, Javed Malikzada, who in an interview that he gave to me said that I don't think the scale and the magnitude of the Holocaust was as big as the Jews projected. So Urdu press does have a very strong influence, and it plays a pivotal role in shaping South Asian Muslim perceptions of Jews, Israel, Zionism, and also what they learn about the Holocaust. India is home to the world's second largest Muslim population. India is the second most populous country of the world. It is certainly the most populous country in the region of South Asia. And if you add up the Muslim populations of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, you get 1/3 of the world's Muslim population. They speak different languages, yet Urdu is their lingua franca. And I just pointed out as to what importance Urdu enjoys, the importance that the Urdu press enjoys. They also have a diaspora, numerically very strong and geographically very widespread. So they are in quite a strong position to influence Muslim opinions across the world. Second is minimization. What is minimization? It is questioning or raising doubts about the scale and magnitude of the Holocaust, the number of Jews killed, the geographical spread of the Holocaust, and the methods that were employed to murder Jews in such mass numbers. It is done through revisionism in academia, and then those so-called researchers are then disseminated via press and social media. Why has it been going on? Since the year 2000, hardcore denial has somewhat weakened. Thanks to a number of events and responses, David Irving's trial, the visits of two popes, John Paul II and Benedictus XVI to Yad Vashem, the Stockholm Forum and International Holocaust Memorial Day established by the United Nations, followed by UNESCO. Perhaps as a result of this weakening, the last decade has evinced the flourishing of new terms defining attitudes toward the Holocaust and the use of its memory. As Professor Dina Porat writes, they include Holocaust trivialization, minimization, and relativization, alongside Holocaust skepticism and softcore denial, as well as terms relating to new types of deniers themselves, such as demi or semi-deniers and moderate deniers. The third point is inversion. What is inversion? It is an inversion of reality in which the Israelis are cast as the new Nazis and the Palestinians as the new Jews, and an inversion of morality The Holocaust is presented as a moral lesson for, or even a moral indictment of the Jews. And as Leslie Clark describes, those who object to these inversions are told, as they were by David Ward, that they are acting in bad faith, only being concerned to deflect criticism of Israel. Quotation marks closed. Clemens Henny, the German political scientist and director of the Berlin International Center for the Study of Anti-Semitism, believes that the equation of Israel slash the Jews slash Zionism with Nazism amounts to an inversion of truth, which is used today as a form of extremely aggressive anti-Jewish propaganda. I already pointed out how important South Asian Muslims are, not just because of their numerical strength, but also because of their geographical spread. There have been occasions when they have displayed their influence. They reached out to African American Muslims in the 1920s and influenced them to organize on the basis of religion rather than nationality or culture. It was absolutely novel, as Arabs there had until now organized themselves on the lines of common national origin, culture and language, but not religion. Today, African American Muslims constitute 30 to 40% of the American Muslim population, South Asians 24.4%, Arabs 12.4%. Muslims are 14.2% of the total Indian population of 1.3 billion, and the Indian population is 17.05% of the world's population. By equating the state of Israel with Nazi Germany and the Palestinians with Jews in Nazi Germany, this is how inversion is done. Although more than 80% of the population in India, the second most populous country in the world, is Hindu, yet when it comes to Holocaust inversion and calls for boycott of Israel, it is the Muslim right, not the Hindu, which is at the forefront. Equally vehement in its opposition to Israel is the left in South Asia. Equating Israel with Nazi Germany is as common in the Urdu press as the leftist press, managed by Muslims as well as non-Muslims, irrespective of language. They do so to defame the state of Israel and achieve its global boycott. Now, I have a few slides to point out, to bring into sharp focus the importance of the press in South Asia, particularly the English language press. India, the region's largest and most populous country, home to 1/6 of the global population, has 82,237 newspapers and news magazines, of which 12,000 are daily newspapers, with 1,406 out of these in the English language. Over 397 television news channels and 462 million internet users. 39% of 1.2 billion Indians read newspapers. Newspapers sell 125 million copies every day in India. According to the World Association of Newspapers, 1 in every 5 daily newspapers in the world is published in India. In 2015, the newspaper industry in India grew by 8%. India print publications attract 43% of all corporate advertising, while in the US the figure is less than 15%. India print publications attract 43%. I already read this out. Between 2010 to 2014, advertising revenues from newspapers in India grew by 40%. India is the world's second largest English-speaking country. It is estimated that around 10% of its population, or 125 million people, speak English, which is second only to the United States. The number is expected to quadruple in the next decade. So what appears in the English, even in the English language press in India, is important, and it has a wide reach. Now I'm presenting to you a few examples of the English language press as to how the Holocaust is inverted. This is from an article that appeared in the newspaper titled Hill Post in 2014, in which the article was titled "The Nazis Are in Gaza." And here the author was this retired Indian bureaucrat Abhay Shukla, who wrote, "It is a cruel irony of history that the Jewish government in Israel is doing to the Muslim residents of Gaza exactly what the Nazis did to them 70 years ago. It is now the face of a reinvented Nazism, an oppressor of the weak and helpless. Another example is that of Kiran Nagarkar from an article that he published in the newspaper Indian Express. Perhaps at the outset, I should make it clear that I am a quarter Jewish. As such, I feel I owe it to my Jewish grandmother to uphold the highest ethical standards when it comes to Israel or any other country, including my motherland, India. If you see that as an act of a turncoat, then you will also have to condemn some of the finest rabbis in the US and all over the world for being loyal to moral values and not to nationalism or my country, right or wrong, as many of the Indian political leaders have been insisting on. So he sees, he thinks it's necessary to point the Jewish element in his background, which he believes would bring greater weightage to the arguments that he makes. He writes that he, referring to Benjamin Netanyahu, is blood brother, perhaps the unrecognized identical twin of Hitler. At least in one respect, they shared the same objective, come what may, get rid of an entire people. If one reads Weber, Purandare on Hitler and India, one realizes that Gandhiji was totally out of his depth when it came to understanding Hitler. He failed to grasp the sheer depth and magnitude of the evil that Hitler stood for. The same must be said about most folks who have been watching the Israeli Prime Minister. While the Führer promoted the bogus doctrine of the Aryan super race, Netanyahu has never had any qualms insisting that the Jews have been the sole inhabitants of the land called Israel for the last 3,000 years, and that Palestinians are the illegitimate occupiers. The only difference between the two unlikely twins is that while the Führer planned the Holocaust on the quiet at the Wannsee Conference and executed it in various concentration camps with such finesse over several years that few Germans and outsiders knew about it, the Israeli Prime Minister does it in the full glare of the media machine, claiming that he and his people are the victims of non-stop violent Palestinian attacks. It is incomprehensible how a people who had suffered the Holocaust, which included horrendous starvation, degradation, and displacement, and took the lives of 6 million Jews, have been so relentlessly wiping out the very people who should have been their fellow citizens and partners. Let's not forget that it was the British who gifted the land originally belonging to the Ottoman Empire during World War I to the Jews. It might come as a shock to most Israelis and the rest of the world that the gifted land had only 3% Jews. Like Nagarkar, Kamal Mitra Chenoy, who is a professor in Delhi, also feels the need to divulge his personal Jewish connection as he questions the rationale behind the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Israel. In his essay titled Modi in Israel, he writes, Modi in Israel, I'm aghast as an Indian, ashamed as a secular Jew, which appeared in the news magazine Daily O. Unlike Nagarkar, he discloses it at the very end of his op-ed by closing it with the words, as a secular Jew, I am deeply ashamed. He calls Israel brutal and criminal and a racist and imperial country. He seems to draw inspiration from Noam Chomsky, Richard Falk, and Ilan Pape, about whom he admiringly mentions, reject the Zionist and racist creation of Israel. Chenoy is a professor at the Center for Comparative Politics and Theory at the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. His mother, Hanna Sen, was born to a Baghdadi Jewish woman from Kolkata, Simcha Gube, and a Hindu convert to Judaism, Pyare Mohan Guha, a prominent lawyer. Chenoy's essay was published by the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, on its official website. In 2016, Indian news magazine Caravan published an essay by Yuri Avnery titled Why Today's Israel Reminds Me of Nazi Germany. The slide is devoted to an article that appeared in the Pakistani newspaper Daily Times, in which the author Arshia Zahid writes the Nazis considered Germany to be a superior nation and justified the killing of Jews by calling them an evil or low race. Sadly, this is the case with Israel now, which believes that it owns this land and is thus allowed to kill Palestinians. Israel's present brutality is highly reminiscent of the Nazi onslaught against European Jews. The violence Nazi Germany released on Jews in the 1930s and in the 1940s is being repeated in the oppression of the Palestinians, and sadly, the US is backing all of this. This is an article that appeared in the Bangladeshi newspaper, Bangladesh Post. Here too, parallels have been drawn between Israel and Nazi Germany. Now we move to trivialization of the Holocaust. What is it? It is abuse of Holocaust memory as a trope in critique of whosoever is perceived to be the other. It can also be competitive memory or competition of victimhood, because Jews are perceived as a people who reached the summit of suffering. Metaphorization, another a form of trivialization, that is metaphorization of the Holocaust. How it manifests itself. Hindu nationalists in India and their foreign cheerleaders project a series of invasions of India by Arabs, Afghans, and Turks as the biggest Holocaust without parallel in human history. They lament the fact that it has not yet been recognized by the world as a genocide, and that its denial does not receive the same attention as that of the Holocaust does. The foreign cheerleaders of Hindu nationalism also attack what they call the negationist policy of India. They recommend that Hindus learn from the Jews, who they consider more focused and consolidated, as to how to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive the way Jews have kept that of the Shoah, to generate in Muslims the sense of guilt necessary to avoid similar destruction in the future. The Jews, according to these foreign cheerleaders of Hindu nationalism, have meticulously recorded after 1945 the persecution that they had suffered in the last 15 centuries, and that it has been enshrined not only in history books, but also in history museums. The Shoah has been referenced in Islamophobic right-wing propaganda pertaining to Indian history. Moreover, as Yulia Garov puts it, such statements are not only ideological attacks on Islam in general and Indian Muslims in particular, but they also contain exaggerated claims about the recording of Jewish history, and they trivialize existing practices of Holocaust memorialization. The commentators try to appear critical of anti-Semitism and supportive of Holocaust education. Their statements about Jewish people meticulously recording incidents of persecution while being more focused and consolidated reveal uncritical reliance on anti-Semitic tropes and the lack of adequate engagement with Holocaust studies. Why do they do so? They do so to settle score with those who they consider to be the other. In the case of India, it is the Muslims. The Hindu nationalist attitude towards Jews and towards Nazis and how they perceive the Holocaust is mediated by the attitude towards Muslims in the country. De-Judaization, that is denial or obfuscation of the fact that the Holocaust particularly and primarily targeted the Jews. How is it done? It is done by the dropping of specific references to Jews in the history of the Holocaust, or by projecting Jews as just one of the several groups targeted during the Holocaust. Why is it done? The fact that the Holocaust happened to the Jews is seen as an obstacle to true politics on the left. Therefore, it is felt necessary to establish that the Nazis' designation of Jews as their victims was arbitrary and or unimportant. It was humanity that was targeted through the Jews, an arbitrarily designated group. the Jewish-centric narrative of the Holocaust is perceived as the illegitimate monopolization of suffering. Hence, it is felt necessary to question its uniqueness, lest the Holocaust gets privileged as the utmost suffering above others of equal value. How do we find its manifestation? The way Holocaust history is taught in India, if at all, and the way it is often written about in the press. An example is how a Holocaust film retrospective held in Lucknow, a major center of Muslim scholarship in 2009, was reported in the Hindi press. It was projected simply as an event devoted to the human suffering during the Second World War. This is Indian mystic Osho. Netflix recently streamed a documentary film on him, Wild Wild West, or Wild Wild Country. I'm forgetting the title, my apologies for that. Indian mystic Osho, or Rajneesh, had scandalously said that Jews are guilty people, and their guilt is very great because they are guilty for Jesus's crucifixion. Out of this guilt, they are always in search of the Adolf Hitlers, someone who can kill them. He outrageously asserted that only when Jews reclaim Jesus, they will be healthy and whole, and then there will be no need for Adolf Hitlers. Quotation marks closed. Notably, the Declaration Nostra Aetate of the Second Vatican Council exonerated the Jews of the traditional Christian accusation of being Christ killers. Osho also said that living in poverty is far more dangerous, far more suffering than dying in a beautifully, scientifically managed gas chamber in Germany, and found Hitler's violence far more peaceful than, for example, the violence of partition of India. Hitler killed people in the most up-to-date gas chambers. Thousands of people can be put in a gas chamber and just a switch is pressed. Within a second, you evaporate. The chimneys of the factory start taking you to smoke. You can call it holy smoke. And this seems to be a direct way towards God. She was his secretary. Here we can see in this image, she's showing us her middle finger. Ma Anand Sheila. She was married to a Jewish man whose surname was Silverman. She was the president of the Rajneesh Foundation and Bhagwan Shri Osho Rajneesh chief spokesperson. She once told the following joke to a TV reporter: how do you fit several hundred Jews into a Volkswagen? Put two Germans in front and the Jews in the ashtray. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, a one-time Calcutta chemist and Sanskrit scholar, who brought the Hare Krishna movement to the US and founded the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, popularly known as Hare Krishna, expressed admiration for Hitler as he did not use atomic bomb. Prabhupada believed that the Germans under him had all the expertise, yet they did not use nuclear weapons. Absolute absence of Holocaust education in India has led to a rise in Hitler's popularity in the country and also that of Nazism, which is visible in many ways. The sale of Hitler's autobiography has greatly increased during the last 10 years. It is now common to find young Indians sporting a photo of Hitler or the Nazi swastika as their profile picture on social networking sites. A number of films have released in India with the name Hitler in the title and with the protagonist as a namesake of Hitler, which, by the way, is an absolutely non-Indian name. There has been Hindu hardliners have openly expressed admiration for Hitler. Recently there was an attempt in 2006 to open a Nazi-themed restaurant, Hitler's Cross. There have been a number of memorabilia, Hitler memorabilia, that have been available in Indian markets. In the recent past, Aryan has emerged as a popular name for boys. North Indians have always identified themselves as Aryans, but Aryan was never a popular name among them, which it has now become. There's a growing demand among young Indians for books and memorabilia on Hitler. There are a few slides devoted to illustrate this popularity. There are biographies of Hitler in almost all of India's major languages are omnipresent, but you would struggle to find literature on the Holocaust anywhere in any Indian language. Now, the only pieces of literature in the Hindi language that I know of focused on the Holocaust are these. This is a book by Ajay Shankar Pandey titled 3 Hours in a Concentration Camp. It is an account of his visit to a concentration camp. Now, this is the Hindi translation of Tadeusz Borowski's short stories. This way for the gas chambers, gentlemen. This is the Hindi translation of the diary of Anne Frank. That this is all that we have in the Hindi language on the Holocaust. In addition to this, there is a collection, a thin booklet of frequently asked questions about the Holocaust, published in Hindi by Yad Vashem. Now, this is an interesting anecdote. One day I discovered that a student of mine had the Nazi flag as his profile picture on Facebook. When I objected to it, he simply added this disclaimer to it that I do not support Nazism and any hatred towards anyone. It's just that I love red color with black stripes formed like swastika. Hitler too has become a popular name. We have a politician from the northeastern Indian state of Meghalaya who has also been minister. He is named after Hitler. His name is Adolf Hitler R. Marak. He says that maybe my parents liked the name and hence christened me Hitler. I'm happy with my name, although I don't have any dictatorial tendencies. An undersecretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, is a person called Hitler Singh. Then there are a number of Indians who have their Facebook accounts with their first name as Hitler. And interestingly, most of them have the surname Singh. And they seem to be so ignorant that they aren't even able to spell the name Hitler correctly, though they seem to be so much in love with Hitler. A few examples are here. This is Hitler Mahakul, Hitler Singh. Singh is a surname common to Hindus and Sikhs in India. There's Hitler Yadav. Then there are also a number of Muslims on Facebook from Pakistan and some from India who have their first name Hitler. Hitler Khan. Khan is a name that is very commonly used by Pashtuns. Pashtuns also have a diaspora in India. They're also known as Pathans. There have been films in various Indian languages with the name Hitler in their title. These are films. This is that Nazi-themed restaurant that they tried to open in 2006. Shah Rukh Khan is a big Bollywood star. He has named his son Aryan. There is this pop group that calls itself Aryans. There are various reasons for Hitler's rising popularity in India. Indian perceptions of Jews are shaped by biased literature. Indian perceptions of Jews are often based on the fictional characters Shylock and Fagin from Merchant of Venice and Oliver Twist, respectively. Most of the South Asians never come into any direct contact with Jews. They know them only through secondary sources. Either their perception is based either on what they are taught in history, if they are ever told anything about the Jews, or what they learned from the English literature, or how the Jews are depicted in cinema, or through their religious narratives. In the case of Abrahamic communities, that is Christians and Muslims. Also, Indians believe that the Indian nationalist Subhash Chandra Bose was able to get some assistance from Hitler in his endeavor to free India, so which puts Hitler in a positive light in their eyes. A new research shows that even before Bose met Hitler, ruler of the erstwhile state Baroda, Sayaji Gaikwad, met him during the 1936 Berlin Olympics as a chancellor of the Chamber of Princes, and signed a pact with him in which it was agreed that all Hindu princes will support Hitler in case of a war. Indians like to think that Hitler adopted the ancient Hindu Aryan symbol of swastika. They also believe that the Germans and the Indians come from the same stock. They are both Aryans. Nazi agents were active in India, targeting both Muslims and Hindus to influence them in favor of their policies. And there have been so many instances when the Hindu hardliners have openly expressed admiration for Hitler. The first Hindu nationalist to come in direct contact with the fascists and their leader Mussolini, an ally of Hitler, was an RSS leader, B.S. Munjay. Soon fascism became so popular among the Hindu nationalists that a conference on it was organized on January 31st, 1934, which was presided over by Hedgever. Exactly 3 months later, on March 31st, 1934, Munjay, Hedgever, and Lalu Gokhale met to discuss the military organization of the Hindus along Italian and German lines. An intelligence report published in 1933 warned that it is perhaps no exaggeration to assert that Sangh, that is the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, popularly known by its acronym RSS, hopes to be in future India what the fascisti are to Italy and the Nazis to Germany. This is a quote from the Hindu Mahasabha spokesperson in 1939. I am conscious that I'm running out of time, so I won't read out these slides. I'll just run through these slides. There are quotes from various Hindu hardliners, Hindu nationalists, expressing open admiration for Nazis and their policies. There's Savarkar, M.S. Golwalkar, who was the chief of the RSS. This is Raj Thackeray. This is Bal Thackeray. He said in an interview, if you take Mein Kampf and if you remove the word Jew and put in the word Muslim, that is what I believe in. He said this in an interview in 1992. This is a lesson that was being given to students in Gujarat in 2002 when class 12 students were given an English grammar test. They were asked to remove if and rewrite the sentence, if you don't like people, kill them. They were also asked in the same exam to rewrite a short passage as a single sentence. The passage read, there are two solutions. One of them is the Nazi solution. If you don't like people, kill them, segregate them, and strut up and down, proclaim that you are salt of the earth. Maryam Jamila was the most prominent admirer of the Islamist organization, Jamaat-e-Islami, and she wrote that Hitler was quite correct when he pointed out the danger of Jewish domination in the world in general and Germany in particular. As far as the remedial measures are concerned, in March 2019, a delegation of 13 journalists from India visited Israel at the invitation of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The delegation included journalists from leading English language newspapers in India. I have ideas, a number of ideas for remedial measures that can be adopted. Telecast of films on the Holocaust, dubbed in Hindi and other Indian languages on the national television, and teacher training program under the National Council for Teacher Education to train teachers to teach about the Holocaust, introduction of anti-Semitism, Holocaust, and mass violence studies at the secondary level of education, introduction of anti-Semitism, Holocaust, and mass violence studies through the involvement of various bodies devoted to higher education in the country, and many others. There have been a number of attempts that I have made to raise awareness of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism in India over the years. This is a conference that I co-organized with two colleagues at OP Jindal Global University focused on the Holocaust. This is a conference that I organized at my current place of work, Presidency University, in 2017. These are poster exhibitions that I have organized on the Holocaust, lectures by luminaries from society to speak against Holocaust denial, an event in memory of Daniel Pearl, to which I invited a prominent Urdu journalist to give a lecture. This is the poster of the screening of A Mighty Heart, film based on Daniel Pearl's assassination. It was screened before a Muslim audience in Lucknow in 2009. This is an image of the inauguration of the Holocaust film retrospective. In 2009, it was the then mayor of Lucknow, Dr. Dinesh Sharma, who inaugurated it, who is now the Deputy Chief Minister of the state of Uttar Pradesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Am I back on? We have some questions, interesting questions. One of the people who put his hand up, if he's still there, I'm going to take it if I can, if he's listening, and that's Tariq Khan. Tariq is Navras' uncle who lives near me in Toronto, in Mississauga, and he's the gentleman who introduced me to Navras, and he's also a former journalist and someone who feels very strongly that we need to do more to educate in India about Jews and Israel. And if he's listening and can unmute himself, I've given him access. So and then I'll take questions by that are written out. There's quite a few. So Navras, if you're there.
Yes. Listening with people's attention.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if I've unmuted Tariq. Tariq, you have to hit the icon at the bottom of your screen to unmute yourself now. If he's not doing that, I'll go on to the questions. Okay. But I just wanted to acknowledge that he's there and he's a very special person. Okay, one of the questions that I think is in everybody's mind, you've talked a little bit about what can be done to mitigate for changing attitudes, I guess, and you've spoken about a few items. Just one quick question. Would you assess that anti-Semitism among Hindus is currently as rampant, dangerous, widespread as that among the Muslims in South Asia that you've spoken of?
No, it isn't so. It's just that Holocaust is used as a trope by Hindu nationalists in their critique of Muslims. There is a great desire to do to the Muslims exactly what the Nazis did to the Jews. And in fact, there is immense support for the state of Israel only because it is seen as an enemy of Muslims. So it is perceived that both Hindus and the Jews have a common enemy in Muslims. So the two should be together against Muslims.
For the wrong reason. Are there any anti-hate laws, anti-racist laws within India?
There is law that can be used against the spread of hate in society through hate speech or by inflammatory speech or anything, any post on social media that is seen as provocative in nature. So there is a law that can be implemented. Since I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not in a position to elaborate upon that, but I am aware that there is a law, or there are laws that can be used to check that.
So while Prime Minister Modi has a relationship with Israel, has been and seems to have gotten along with Prime Minister Netanyahu, is that strictly economic, technological, or is he someone who would speak out against anti-Semitism?
Well, he hasn't yet done so, but in case he is required, I don't think he would have any qualms in speaking against anti-Semitism, provided it does not negatively affect his popularity.
Is there any curiosity among younger people to just learn about Jews, Judaism in Israel, or is it really that it's just not that relevant?
Yes, there is very, very much so, precisely because of the reason that Israel is seen as a strong state that knows how to teach Muslims a lesson.
Oh.
The admiration comes from that.
The
admiration doesn't come from the fact that the basis of the admiration is not that the Jews are seen as a resilient people who could rise up even after the Holocaust. That is not the reason why Israel is admired. Israel is admired precisely because of what is seen as its high-handedness when it comes to dealing with its Muslim opponents.
Okay, now I have a slightly two questions that are a little different. One is, there are Indian Jews, right? There was an Indian Jewish community, never very large, and there are Indian Jews in Israel. Do those people, the fact that there were Jews, does that have any impact or any relevance or any potential to impact the feelings people have about Jews?
No, this is very, very interesting. In fact, Jews and Muslims have always had superb relationship in South Asia. With the only exception of Kolkata. If you look at Jews, wherever they are in India, whether in Ahmedabad or in Mumbai, Mumbai is home to 80% of the Indian Jewish population, and most of them are resident in Muslim neighborhoods, where they have had an excellent relationship with their Muslim neighbors. All synagogues in India are looked after by Muslims. All Jewish cemeteries are looked after by Muslims because there aren't enough Jews in India anymore now to look after these places. Of course, the financial expenses are borne by Jews, yet the people on the ground are Muslims looking after synagogues and their cemeteries. Most of the students in the Jewish-run schools are Muslim. And yet there have been instances when Jews have been attacked. For instance, all Jews were thrown out of Karachi by 1967, and there was a series of attacks on Jews in Karachi coinciding with the Arab-Israeli wars. But the attacks, interestingly, were not perpetrated by local Muslims, who again had a superb equation with their Jewish neighbors. The attacks were perpetrated by the Muslim migrants, the Urdu-speaking Muslim migrants from the plains of northern India, who had known Jews only through secondary sources and not as a result of any direct contact. Same has been the case with Jews in Bombay. The Jews in Bombay were never attacked, yet when they were attacked, it was only when they were either mistaken for Muslims, as during the riots following the demolition of the Babri Mosque, when the Rodef Shalom synagogue was burnt because it was mistaken for a Muslim building, because there were a number of Muslim residents where the synagogue, the building in which the synagogue was housed.
One of the facts of Israeli life for young people is that they backpack, as you know, before military service. My understanding is a lot of Israeli youth go to India. Are they in any danger there?
No, they aren't, to the best of my knowledge. But there have been reports when there have been conspiracies by Islamist terrorists and militants to target Jews, but uh, until now, except for the attack on the Chabad Lubavitch Center in 2008, no such attacks have taken place. There was one more attack in 2012 when an Israeli diplomat's car was exploded. So as I said, whenever there have been attacks on Jews in India, those attacks have been perpetrated by foreign elements and not by local Muslims.
So maybe we need to organize trips for young Indian students to go to Israel. Maybe it needs to work both ways.
Yes, yes. It is interesting that the Arab-Israeli conflict has failed to dent the cordiality of relations between Muslims and Jews in India. Yet what I have been observing is some degree of pressure in the Jewish community, in the Indian Jewish community, pressure of self-preservation. For instance, I have seen Hindus from Pakistan, when they are interviewed, they only speak well of Pakistan. If you interview Hindus of Bangladesh, they speak well of Bangladesh. But we all know that there is a degree of persecution of Hindu minority in both these countries. There has been discrimination against Jews also in Iran. But no Iranian Jew would ever muster the courage to speak against the state of Israel. They would rather speak against Zionism. So this is a pressure of self-preservation.
Right.
So what I'm noticing is that the Jews, in spite of the cordiality of their relations with Muslims, they are deliberately trying to distance themselves from Muslims now, particularly the Bani Israel Jews in India.
I have only a couple more questions before we close, Navras. One is, how has India voted at the UN? Has it supported Israel or voted generally against Israel?
Generally, India has voted against Israel, but ever since Modi became the Prime Minister of India, there has been a change. The first change was noticed when India decided to stay neutral. And the second change was when India actually voted in favor of Israel on some resolution.
And they did. Okay.
Yes.
One question that, though I haven't figured out how to get your uncle on the call, he's asked many times of his Jewish colleagues here, how might we fare if Israel would produce material in Urdu and or Hindi? They produce a lot of literature and produce newspapers in every European language, as far as I can tell, and everything in Arabic. But I understand you get nothing from Israel in the languages that are most popular in India. Is that right?
That's true. As I mentioned, the only piece of literature that has ever been produced targeting Indians to make them aware of the Holocaust is a thin booklet, which is bilingual. It's a collection of frequently asked questions on the Holocaust. It was published by Yad Vashem. This has been the tendency for quite some time. The Zionists initially, even during the Mandate days, during the Mandate Palestine days, the Zionists neglected India, while the Arabs took advantage of that. And the Mufti of Jerusalem, Amin Husseini, was able to draw funds, huge funds, from South Asian Muslims. The Zionists woke up very late when it was only in the 1930s that they sent emissaries to India. One of the most prominent emissaries sent by them was Dr. Olswanger, who was a Sanskrit scholar. And the other one was Kalimba, who was friends with Gandhi. Yet they could not win over the Indian nationalists to their side, because unlike the Arabs, who could show solidarity with Indian nationalists struggling against the British colonial rule. The Zionists were careful not to do so because they wanted to draw concessions from the British in order to get more Jews fleeing Europe to come and settle, to be allowed to come and settle in Mandate Palestine. So it was necessary that they did not antagonize the British rulers then. So this was in coming out openly in support of Hindu nationalists, or Indian nationalists in their struggle for freedom from the British rule.
Thank you, Navras. I'm going to draw this to a close. We do have more questions. I can't get to all of them. I would like to offer, if it's convenient with you, that people could send their questions directly to you.
Sure, they're most welcome to do
just
so.
state your email and people can do that if they wish?
Yes, they're most welcome to do so.
Okay, do you want to
Thank
state Navras, say your email address?
Yes, my email address is very simple. I'll just open, I'll just share my screen. It's there.
Okay. While you're doing that, that's just to let people know that they can be in touch with
here
you.
it is. Perhaps it is visible to everybody. There is my email address. It's navras.hrs@presiunif.ac.in.
Thank you. And thank you again. That was most enlightening. I'm so glad we could do this because our organization is aware that most of the time Jews are looking to what the Arabs think. Islamism is associated in most people's minds with radical branches of Muslims who are Arabic or perhaps Iranian, but very little is known by Jews about South Asians. And so you have made me very aware over the years of the concerns we should have, and we need to take action. So thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you everyone for participating today. And as I said earlier, we will post this on our site, and we invite you to come and check us out at caef.ca and provide support. Financial support would also be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.